So if everyone could take their seats, please. Good morning and welcome to the Chamber's annual State of the City Address with Mayor O'Dekirk. We welcome our in-person guests as well as our virtual audience who is watching the program live. Thank you, Mayor, for taking the time to reschedule this event so quickly to address our members and the community. I am Jen Howard, President of the Joliet Region Chamber of Commerce and Industry. But before we begin the program, I'd like to thank our State of the City presenting sponsors. They are AT&T, Citgo, Cullinan Properties, ExxonMobil, V3 Companies, and Hudson Hollister. We also had a record number of businesses sponsor our 2021 Breakfast and Luncheon Series. I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge each of them. They are Amita Health St. Joseph Medical Center, Associated Orthodontists, AT&T, Bank Financial, Bays Investment, Berman Capital Management and Research, Blue Ribbon Products, Busey Bank, CNC Vision Gallery, Corsetti Structural Steel, Darcy Buick GMC, Delaney and Vroon, Fazio Insurance, First Midwest Bank, First National Bank of Ottawa, Gateway Foundation, Hamilton Consulting Engineers, Illinois Securities Company, Joliet Area Community Hospice, Joliet Bank and Trust, Joliet Catholic Academy, Joliet Job Corps Campus, Joliet Junior College, Midland States Bank, Nicor Gas, NRG Energy, Newmark Credit Union, Prairie Land Audiology, Rathbun, Cerniak and Kozel, RISE, State Farm Insurance, Howard Wright, Three Rivers Construction Alliance, University of St. Francis, Wormer, Rogers, Duran and Rusin, and Window World of Joliet. Now it is my pleasure to introduce to all of you our 2021 Board Chair, Jeff Pearson.
Thank you, Jen. It is my honor to introduce to you our Mayor, Bob O'Dekirk. Bob is a graduate of the University of Illinois and the John Marshall Law School. Prior to becoming an attorney, Bob worked as a Joliet police officer for 10 years, where he worked as both a patrolman and in a plainclothes capacity. After graduation of law school, Bob worked as an assistant corporate counsel for the city of Chicago. Bob began working in private practice after 3 years as a prosecutor, where he litigated countless criminal, family cases, and employment rights cases. In 2008, Bob was recruited to work with the United States Department of State in Iraq. Bob was deployed in August of 2008 to assist the United States Army in its efforts to rebuild, train, mentor, and advise the Iraqi police. After 20 months for service in Iraq, Bob returned to the United States and resumed his practice of law and became a partner with O'Dekirk, Allred, and Associates. In April 2011, Bob was elected to the Joliet City Council from the 2nd District and elected mayor of Joliet in 2015 and re-elected in 2019. Bob is married to Rebecca, and they are raising their blended family on the near west side of Joliet and are parishioners at St. Raymond's Cathedral. Please welcome Mayor Bob O'Dekirk.
Thank you, Jeff. First of all, it's great to be here. It's great to see people back together again. It's always a good event giving this speech every year, and I'm really thank you for coming out. And obviously, everybody on Zoom. I would do a brief introduction. I don't want to go too deep into this because I'm not sure who's on Zoom right now, but there are a couple elected officials here. Councilwoman Sherry Reardon and Councilman Larry Hug, thank you for coming. There's City of Joliet staff, Dawn Malik, Greg Blasky from the police and fire departments, and of course, our new city manager, Jim Caparelli. So thank you all for coming. Getting into the speech in 2020, obviously, there's a lot of things that can be said about this year. It was quite different for all of us, a different experience, and certainly being at the helm of city government, it was a challenging and difficult year. There were 3 events that really stood out last year that I believe people in Joliet are going to be speaking about 50 or 100 years from now. Obviously, number one is COVID and what happened within the city. Number two would be the civil unrest that our city and our country saw last summer, and specifically the riots on May 31st. And then number three would be the city's decision to choose a new source of water. So I plan on spending a little bit of time in all three of those subjects. Before I do, though, as always, I'm going to start with some of the numbers, the financial numbers for the city of Joliet. So let me get into that. Then I'm going to dive a little deeper into those other issues. Obviously, the big story for the finances was the effect of COVID and the effect of the shutdown that happened. Not just in our city, but throughout the state and throughout the country. I'm happy to report that the financial numbers are better than I think we anticipated a year ago. Certainly better than I thought they'd be when I began preparing the speech. And it's good information that I want to pass out to, especially to this community. The big hit that we took in finances was from our gaming revenue. We lost about $10 million of income from the riverboats being shut down and being partially open as they are right now. In 2018, the city collected $17.8 million in riverboat revenue. 2019, the city collected $17.3 million. Last year, we collected $7.5 million. That's the biggest loss that we took in Joliet, came from the gaming revenue. Our sales tax was down slightly. 2018, $50.2 million. In 2019, $49.6 million. In 2020, $48 million in sales tax. So again, it's down a little bit, but not significant, a small amount. The hotel motel tax, surprisingly, was better than what I expected. In 2018, the city collected $2.7 million. In 2019, $2.6 million. Last year, 2020, $2.5 million. So again, it's down a little bit, but not significantly. Another surprising number would be revenue from building permits issued by the city. Again, 2018, the city collected $1.8 million. In 2019, $1.7 million. Last year, the city of Joliet collected $4.1 million in building permits. Not quite sure what accounts for that number. Maybe people being off of work gave them more time for home improvements. There is a lot of economic development throughout Joliet. There's new housing starts, but that was a great number and certainly a trend that we'd like to see continue going forward. We more than doubled the amount of revenue from building permits last year. The real estate transfer tax, again, similar to previous years, 2018, $3.1 million, 2019, $2.2 million, last year, $2.3 million. So that stayed somewhat consistent. Water tap-on fees were the same way, $1.1 million in 2018, $850,000 in 2019, $1.02 million in 2020. So to sum it up, the total general fund revenue. In 2018, the city collected $182 million. In 2019, the city collected $185 million. Last year, the city collected $181.8 million. Again, obviously, it's about $4 million shy of where we were the previous year. That does include the $5 million in CARES Act funding that was given to the city of Joliet. But again, we dipped in the reserves about $4 million. We entered 2020 with $46.8 million in reserve. We came out of it with $41.5 million. That's a real credit to city government, to the elected officials that are here, the prior elected officials, prior mayors, to help build that reserve fund. It's an emergency fund. It's there for times of crisis, and we certainly faced one in 2020. But the people of Joliet need to know city government is healthy. We're economically healthy moving forward, even coming out of the year with COVID. So that's a great number. One final number, I talk about this every year, is the estimated assessed value of property in Joliet. Between 2008 and 2014, property values in Joliet decreased every year. Since I became mayor in 2015, we reversed that trend. Property values have gone up every year in Joliet. In 2020, property values raised on average another 5.04%. So since 2015, in the last 6 years, property values in Joliet have gone up an average of 34.6%. It's an outstanding number. It's something civically we should all take pride in. I certainly do. And again, a trend that we want to see going forward. So those are the numbers. And again, a little bit better than what I expected to deliver, but it wasn't horrible news. I'm going to get into the COVID response a little bit. Let me start with COVID from last year. Obviously, it's a big story, and everybody in this room has their own experiences, their own personal stories. I just want to relate my experience as the mayor of Joliet, what it was, what we were facing running the third biggest city in the state of Illinois with COVID. So I gave this speech on February 24th of last year. And as always, I reviewed my notes when preparing this year's speech. Nowhere in my speech a year ago was there any mention of a pandemic, of the COVID virus, or potential lockdowns. I don't think anyone was thinking that way on February 24th. Fast forward to March 5th of last year, myself, Councilman Hug, John Grueling, and Derek Conley took a trip out of Midway Airport, a day trip to Kansas City to see the North Point project in Kansas City. Again, life hadn't changed as of March 5th of last year. I do remember seeing a couple people in the airport wearing masks and comments amongst ourselves how odd it looked to see people with masks. This is March 5th of last year. And obviously that changed dramatically. On March 9th, Governor Pritzker issued the first disaster proclamation for the state of Illinois. On March 16th, I signed the first order declaring a local state of emergency in Joliet. And on April 2nd, I signed the second order declaring a local state of emergency. What those orders did, amongst other things, was shut down City Hall. It combined the council meetings. The Open Meetings Act was suspended. The way we were going to do business in the city changed instantly. What we did within the city in those dark days in mid-March and early April, I described it to the media at the time as an all hands on deck approach. That was accurate. That's the way we approached this at City Hall. We had daily meetings with myself, the city manager, and department heads. Instantly, what we were facing with the city, again, early on, not knowing the extent of the pandemic, not knowing the mortality rate or who the disease was going to target, not knowing the things we know today, we were faced with the idea that we may have to shut down portions of the fire department or police department, or what happens if a third of the water department gets sick and can't come to work anymore. So they were dire times at City Hall. And again, I described it as an all hands on deck approach. We made the decision to split up staff. We worked with the fire chief and police chief to feverishly try to find protective equipment for our first responders and for our city employees. The city staff divided up their workforce with the idea that if COVID were to hit one sector, it would not shut the entire sector of city government down. We realized that city government can't fail. And that was the approach that we took. City Hall eventually would reopen on June 1st of last year, and then close again on November 20th of last year, and then reopen on January 25th of this year. And what I really want to highlight, I'm going to go a little bit further into COVID, is the leadership role that the city of Joliet took throughout this process. It's something that needs to be said, and our citizens need to understand exactly what the city of Joliet did. I talked internally about having meetings every morning. We also reached out to community partners. City of Joliet took the impetus to do this. We spoke regularly with Will County Health Department officials. We reached out and spoke with school district officials for all school districts that affected Joliet. We talked to representatives from both Silver Cross and St. Joe's Hospital. We spoke with Mike Hennessy in the United Way to help coordinate the charitable organizations in Joliet and how they were going to respond to the pandemic. We held numerous phone calls that we sponsored with surrounding communities, surrounding mayors and city managers to pass on information, share what we knew in Joliet, and talk about what we were doing in Joliet and what we were hearing from all these other community officials. Personally, I met routinely. I was on conference calls with Governor Pritzker or other Illinois mayors. I held several Zoom conversations with Mayor Cherico from Naperville and Mayor Irwin from Aurora to discuss what their cities were doing, to compare strategies, and again, to pass that information. We also held multiple press conferences in the Joliet City Hall Council chambers. And many of those press conferences were not just covered by local media. We had Chicago media outlets that were desperate for information that were coming to Joliet. At those press conferences, we invited many of the local officials I talked about earlier, again, to share information and pass on information on what we were doing in Joliet. In March of last year, we were scheduled to do the public hearing for the North Point project. That was suspended for a month when COVID first hit. We decided to go forward in April and do the public hearing in April. We basically created a public hearing system that was copied by Will County government and by governments all throughout Illinois. We led the charge on how to do this during the pandemic and during government shutdowns. We also, and I think this is important, on April 14th of 2020, I called for a special city council finance meeting with the council as a whole. Mr. Gadati, our finance director, had shared projections with myself and the city manager privately. I thought it was important that the entire city council hear those projections and also the people of Joliet. So we held a very public meeting with Mr. Guidotti, giving a very dire forecast of what the city of Joliet was going to look like financially if the government shutdown did not end throughout the rest of the year. And unfortunately, myself and the city council took a lot of criticism on that message. Other communities were not being that forthcoming, in my opinion, or were not sharing that information. But just the opposite. I think the Joliet City Council deserves credit for going forth publicly and sharing that information with the public. As it turns out, many of the things that Mr. Guidotti was asking for was suggesting, such as layoffs or shutting down fire stations or shutting down part of city government, we were able to avoid. But again, I give the city council a lot of credit. It was a tough meeting to attend, and you certainly open yourself up for scrutiny, but that type of transparency is what people should expect from government, and that's what Joliet officials got from Joliet government. And then finally, when I talk about the leadership, it goes full circle to what's happening today. I see Deputy Chief Jeff Carey and Chief Blasky here from the fire department. What's happening at Joliet West High School is a story that again, can't be overstated here in Joliet. And it's something that the people of Joliet are going to remember you for many years from now. As of Saturday, Deputy Chief Carey reported the Joliet Fire Department, who are volunteering along with the Councilwoman Quillman and doctors and nurses that are volunteering, have distributed 25,000 vaccines to the people of Joliet and surrounding communities. And it has to be said, this is not done or not being done in conjunction with any other form of government or with the health department. This was a local initiative that came from Deputy Chief Carey and from our Joliet firefighters. And these are people that are volunteering 6 days a week, are there volunteering to give these shots out. So again, we are leaders in the vaccine distribution. I don't know of any other area in the county that has matched what our volunteers have done. I know other cities and other fire departments have come to Joliet West to see the model that we put together. They've taken it back to their own towns and trying to implement it in their own city. Again, it's just a great example of how the city of Joliet have been leaders throughout the COVID process. So again, thank you, Chief and Deputy Chief, and to all the volunteers that are out there. Thank you for the honor you brought to our city. The second major event from last year I want to talk about is the civil unrest that occurred throughout our country and throughout Joliet. And before I get into the specifics of May 31st, I do have to say the great majority of protests that we saw in Joliet, probably 95%, not more, were nonviolent, peaceful protests that were supported by the city of Joliet, supported by the police department. And obviously that's part of our system of government, part of our society, that we encourage nonviolent protests. What happened on May 31st of last year was not a nonviolent protest. Earlier in the day, there were two protests, one at City Hall and then one at Jefferson and Larkin, that were peaceful, nonviolent protests. Around 6 o'clock that evening, I had just had dinner with my family. I was on my front porch and I received a text message from Scott Slocum of WJOL asking me if I could confirm that people were entering the intersection of Jefferson and Larkin. They were jumping on vehicles, trying to shut down traffic at the intersection. So I immediately left my house in my personal car. I went to the intersection of Jefferson and Larkin. What I saw when I arrived, I saw Sergeant Madlock and others in the skirmish line, about 15 Joliet police officers in the street, and a large, very large crowd of people in the White Castle parking lot, all the way back into the Kmart parking lot, several hundred people in that area. And it just to rewind a little bit, we had known, we were tracking at City Hall what had happened earlier in the week. The rioting began in Minneapolis. On Friday and Saturday night, the rioting occurred in Chicago and downtown Chicago. And then on Sunday, it began to spread out. Calumet City got hit, Orland Park got hit. So we were tracking and we assumed that it was going to come to Joliet, and it did. So when I was in that intersection, one of the leaders of the nonviolent protests approached me and the chief of police and were asking us if they could enter the intersection for 9 minutes and kneel at Jefferson and Larkin to commemorate the 9 minutes that the police officer knelt on George Floyd's neck. While we were having that conversation, members from the crowd began throwing rocks and bottles at the police officers. I saw a Joliet police officer get hit in the face with a rock. The leader of the protest, who had a bullhorn, began telling the crowd to stop. This was not violent. He lost control, and shortly after, the mob left the area and the rioting began. The original push from the mob was to head to Louis Joliet Mall. I got in my car. I followed many individuals with out-of-state license plates that descended on the mall. When I arrived at the mall, I saw that there had been vandalism to the mall. They attempted to gain entry, but were unable to do so. Joliet police were instantly on the spot, meeting force with force and taking people into custody. The mob then crossed Route 30 and went to Louis Joliet Point. At Louis Joliet Point, they were successful in gaining entrance into Hellsberg Diamond, into Dick's Sporting Goods and TJ Maxx. The looting began in those stores. Again, Joliet police officers met them in force and instantly took people in custody, stopped the looting that was happening at Louis Joliet Point. The mob then traveled from the mall to the Northridge Plaza and Larkin and Theodore, and again began to loot Burlington Coat Factory, Skechers, and Ross Dress for Less, and do damage to the other stores in the area. Once again, the Joliet Police Department arrived in force, stopped the looting, and took numerous people into custody. The mob proceeded to the Walgreens at Ingalls and Larkin, entered the Walgreens and began looting there. Once again, Joliet police arrived on the scene and took people into custody. At every turn, the Joliet police met the mob and stopped the rioting, stopped the looting inside our city of Joliet. It was at that point at Ingalls and Larkin that I abandoned my car and I jumped in the squad car with Officer Evans, who's a veteran police officer. I spent the rest of the evening with Officer Evans. What happened after that point in Walgreens, the mob attempted to get to downtown Joliet. And I think it's the belief of the police staff that the initial push out at the mall may have been a ruse to try to draw police resources out west, and that the real intent was to destroy downtown Joliet, to burn down the Rialto Theater or damage or burn down the courthouses or police departments like they did in other cities. Unfortunately for them, when they arrived in downtown Joliet, they were met with an army of police, most notably the Will County Sheriff's Department. I want to thank Sheriff Kelly, who were out in force, as well as Joliet Police and Illinois State Police. Their attempts at looting or burning down or damaging downtown Joliet were foiled again by the police. The mob essentially then settled back in onto Jefferson Street, where the riot occurred throughout the night. So I do want to thank some of the police departments that were involved, and I may be missing some, but the departments that I saw, again, the Will County Sheriff's Police, the Illinois State Police, and the ILEAS team that were deployed to Joliet, the Crest Hill Police Department and Mayor Solomon for their assistance, and the Plainfield Police Department and Mayor Collins for their assistance. If Joliet police were left alone, the crowd and the extent of the violence was too big. We would not have been able to contain it the way we did. And I just, again, want to reiterate what was happening on Jefferson Street that night. I spoke with several business owners that met crowds of people in the parking lot. They had long guns, were holding the crowd off armed. The scenes that we saw in Los Angeles after the Rodney King riots, this was happening in Joliet that night. One, a mom and pop family grocery store, Hispanic grocery store, the mob attempted to burn down. Our brave firefighters responded in the midst of all the violence and put the fire out. And I can't say enough about what I saw that night from our police officers and our firefighters that were in the middle of this. Every one of them stood tall and did their duty, and they stood up for the people of Joliet. And I just, again, when I talk about historic moments and proud moments, what our police department did, what our fire department did that night will not be forgotten by anybody who was involved or saw the extent of what was going on. I just want to end with this, a pledge that I'm going to make. As long as I'm the mayor of the city of Joliet, we will never sit back and allow lawlessness to rule the day or rule the night. Our police department and myself as mayor will do everything we can to preserve the peace and protect the people and the property in Joliet. We demonstrated that on May 31st, and God forbid, moving forward, if it happened again, I'm confident that our police and fire would take the same response. The third issue, and on a little bit of a lighter note, would be the water decision that we made. I think everyone's familiar with the issue. I'm going to give a quick rundown. Since 1907, the city of Joliet has been drawing water off an aquifer. It's certainly not a local aquifer, it's regional. We've known for some time that the aquifer is being depleted and eventually going to run dry. In 2017, Mayor Weisner from Aurora was holding a water seminar. He invited me to attend, and I did. After the seminar, Mayor Weisner pulled me aside and he said, Mayor, Aurora began pulling off of this aquifer 35 years ago. We're getting water from the Fox River and the aquifer. What are you doing in Joliet? Well, the answer was not much, but that changed abruptly. I came back to Joliet. We reformed the environmental committee. And I can't say enough about the volunteers in that committee who put forth hundreds of hours with city staff. They were tasked with drilling deep into this and recommending a new source of water for the Joliet City Council. So Allison Swisher, who's here today, led the charge in this. This has been a several-year project between Allison, the engineers, the consultants we've hired, and the environmental committee, the volunteers. They investigated 14 different sources of water for the city of Joliet. They ultimately narrowed it to a Lake Michigan option with the recommendation to go through the city of Hammond. They have Joliet pump the water, clean the water, and pump it back to Joliet through the city of Hammond. When it got to the city council, the council wanted to keep a second option open, which is either the Hammond option or buy water directly from the city of Chicago. So then for the next year, again, we drilled down, we entered into contract negotiations with both sources. Ultimately, on December 17th of last year, Mayor Lightfoot from Chicago and Mayor McDermott from Hammond came to the Joliet City Council chambers. They made a public pitch with their staff to the Joliet City Council. And on January 28th of this year, the final vote was taken and the City Council chose the source of water from the city of Chicago. So without getting too deep into what happened, again, I think it's been widely reported. I would say the city of Chicago during that year negotiation 3 times came back to the table and upped their offer. The city of Joliet is in a position now where we can become regional providers of water. The water that we're going to buy from Chicago can be resold out of Joliet. And again, I've talked about it with the COVID crisis. I talked about it with the rioting. The leadership that our city showed during this period, I think is something of note that should be noted. We understand other communities around us are facing the same problem we are. We understand they don't have the resources. What we have provided, along with the 3-year roadmap that we are sharing with other communities, we're providing a way forward for everybody to move forward. And obviously, the Chamber of Commerce event, I think business people understand 50 years from now, Will County and Joliet is going to look different than it does right now, just as it looks different today than what it did 50 years ago. This area is going to continue to expand, continue to boom. The southwest area of Chicago is going to continue to grow. What we have put in place in Joliet, what we are putting in place is a long-term solution of clean, fresh water. Again, not just for our citizens, but for citizens of all around us moving forward. I definitely believe the city of Joliet is going to reap dividends from this 50 or 100 years moving forward from the decision this city council made back in January. One other side point, along with the new source of water from Chicago, we are committed to completely redoing our internal water system. Again, we've been drawing water off of a well. We're going to keep that system intact. If there ever was a disturbance, either in the pipeline or in the Lake Michigan water quality, we will be able to switch back to the well system on a temporary basis. But we have to redo our entire infrastructure. We also have to get a Lake Michigan allotment, we have to reduce the water loss that we experience in Joliet. Right now, because of aging infrastructure, aging water mains, the city of Joliet loses about 30% of the water that we're pumping from the aquifer. That's going to change. We have to get below 10%. So we're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars internally to improve the city water system. So this is a monumental project, but it's one that I'm certainly proud of as mayor that we're tackling. Again, I can't say enough about Allison Swisher, all the years of work she's put into this, her staff, and again, the volunteers and the environmental commission for getting us to that point. And just simply say, again, this was a monumental, historic decision that happened in 2020. So I'm shift gears a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about the economic development. I always like doing that in this speech, and it's important to do so. I'm going to not spend as much time as I normally would, but a couple of projects of note that need to be talked about. Again, I said earlier about city government not shutting down during the pandemic. The economic development that continued throughout Joliet in 2020 is another fine example of that. The big project is North Point. If I could spend just a minute on the North Point project. Again, I think people understand it, but they may not understand in the detail that I'm going to explain today. North Point is $1 billion investment that's coming to Joliet. They have signed a 20-year project labor agreement with local labor. So there will be 20 years of local labor jobs. Everything built inside of North Point will be built with union workers. They also are bringing 10,000 new jobs to Joliet, as well as hundreds of millions of tax dollars. That's tax money, not just for the city of Joliet, but for Will County, for different township governments, for the Joliet Park District, for the Joliet Library, and for numerous school districts throughout Joliet and throughout the region. Aside from those benefits, what North Point is proposing to build without any city incentives is an enclosed system that's going to tie directly into Centerpoint. And to understand North Point and understand why this is a good project, you have to understand what's happening inside of Centerpoint. Centerpoint is the largest inland port on the North American continent. I've said that, I'm sure everyone's heard that. I'm not sure if people in the region quite grasp what that means. There are two intermodals, one in Elwood, one in Joliet, Burlington Northern and Santa Fe Railroad. The railroads are in the process of doubling the operations inside Centerpoint. E-commerce has exploded. The demand for goods and online shopping has exploded. What's happening inside of Centerpoint has exploded. So currently, what the truck traffic we're facing in our region is going to double in the next few years based upon what the railroads are doing inside of Centerpoint. The North Point project is not going to bring any additional trucks into our region. North Point is coming to service what's happening inside of Centerpoint. And the closed loop model that North Point is representing and is going to build is the first real attempt to control what is happening in our region. Instead of random warehouses like you see all over Joliet or Crest Hill or Wilmington or Manuka or Elwood or New Lenox or Shanahan or Morris or any of these other communities that are building warehouses or logistics, North Point is going to be self-enclosed, tied directly into Centerpoint. The trucks coming and going from North Point and Centerpoint are not going to be on local roads. They're going to travel directly from I-55 or I-80 in and out of Centerpoint, in and out of North Point. So it is a big step forward, and it certainly is a responsible step forward. With or without North Point, the truck traffic in our region is going to double. With North Point, we have a responsible way to try to deal with this and try to handle it. Without North Point, the current chaos that you see is going to get considerably worse in Joliet. And I do want to take a minute to point out and thank the city council people that took this vote against a lot of pressure, both within the media and with groups outside of the city of Joliet, specifically Councilman Hugg, Councilman Mudrin, Councilwoman Quilman, Councilwoman Reardon, Councilman Morris, and Councilman Landy. They did their job for the people of Joliet. It was a big step moving forward. And again, they deserve credit for the decision that they made. Beyond North Point, in 2020, we saw finally the opening of the Will County Courthouse. This was a project that I had worked out very early on as mayor. Myself and Councilman Girl met routinely with both Democrats and Republicans, including Reagan Freitag, who's here today from the Will County Board. I think it was clear that the Will County government was going to move the courthouse out of downtown Joliet. Became a priority early on as mayor to stop that from happening. We negotiated with everyone on the county board and struck a deal. The county courthouse opened this year. Part two of that deal was to reopen Chicago Street. That also happened in 2020. I think that was overshadowed a little bit by COVID, but that is a big step towards the development for downtown Joliet. Numerous private investors have communicated that not only to me and city government, but also to stakeholders in downtown, that a straight shot from I-80 right to downtown and back is key to opening up that corridor. So we're very happy to accomplish that in 2020. At Jefferson and Larkin, Tony's Finer Foods made a commitment to Joliet that's been blighted property for the last 4 or 5 years. It won't be moving forward. Tony's is going to take over that property, not only rebuild the property and clean up the parking lot, but then also bring additional stores into that lot. So welcome, Tony's. The AT&T building downtown has been given a complete facelift. They also are gutting and redoing the inside. They'll be open for office space as well as a workout facility on the second floor. Unitas Marketing is opening at 315 North Ottawa. That was the old Steelworkers Hall that again has been completely rehabbed. I think there's a ribbon cutting coming soon. The chamber probably knows about that. But I've been inside. I saw the great job they did. I want to welcome them to downtown Joliet. The Cullinan project continues to move forward at I-80 and I-55. I think it's fair to say that COVID was a difficult blow for the Cullinan people, but they have not stopped in their efforts, and they secured a major point in 2020. They received a commitment from the state of Illinois to fund the interchange directly off of I-55 onto that property. And everybody familiar with it understands how key that interchange is to moving forward. I want to congratulate the Cullinan people and city staff who worked with them. That was a major step forward to get that commitment from the state of Illinois. The interchange is going to be built, which means that property, after many, many years of starts and stops, is going to be developed. Harbor Freight is coming to City of Joliet. This is another project inside of Center Point. It's a 1.5 million square foot distribution center. It'll be hundreds of jobs. And again, like North Point, the City of Joliet is giving no incentives to Harbor Freight. And the question's often asked about what the benefit is of logistics or the warehouses to Joliet. And there are arguments in both directions, but Harbor Freight, just to give an idea of the benefit, Harbor Freight will generate $200,000 a year in property tax for the City of Joliet. So beyond the jobs, there is an upside to these projects coming to our city, which is why both Joliet and all the surrounding communities are doing their best to land those type of projects. And finally, and this, quite frankly, judging by the lines, may be the most popular of all the things I've talked about. Chick-fil-A opened near the Louis Joliet Mall on Route 30. Thank you, Chick-fil-A, for their investment. Again, it's a nice addition to Joliet. I think, though, what Chick-fil-A represents, along with Rise, the cannabis store, which is out there, is what's happening at the mall. One door closes, another door opens. We've seen Binny's, Chick-fil-A, we've seen what's happened by Costco. I think in 2021, you're going to see more decisions in that corridor. So the mall is changing. The anchor stores, some of them have gone away, but I would not say by any means that the mall or that area of Joliet is dead. That area is in transition. And I think when you see places like Chick-fil-A coming in as an example, and I think in 2021, you're going to see other examples of real amenities coming into that area. Also in 2021, I plan on saying this a month ago before my injury, it's dated now, but the Holboat Road Bridge is going to be built in Joliet. That announcement was made a couple of weeks ago. Again, like North Point, the Holboat Road Bridge is an attempt to mitigate and control the truck traffic that's in our region. It's the first real step forward, I think, other than Arsenal and I-55, the first project to get the trucks off of local roads. And again, I've talked about this in years past. I won't go into too much detail, but there's no Joliet tax dollars being spent on that bridge. There's about $25 million from the state of Illinois to redo the interchange at I-55 and Holboat Road. The rest of the money, about $200 million, is being invested by private investors. It's a public-private partnership with no cost to Joliet taxpayers, but Joliet citizens are going to see the benefit from that bridge, with the idea of getting the trucks off of Chicago Street, off of Briggs Street, and a route directly in and out of Center Point. So it's a big announcement. Again, that happened within the last year. Real briefly, I put together a wish list, what else I'd like to see in 2021. The obvious is the end of COVID and a return to normalcy, a return to all the events that we're used to seeing throughout the summer, Taste of Joliet, the downtown events, the parades, the holiday parade. I think most of us are very positive in where we're heading with COVID, but that's obviously number one on my list of what I'd like to see. Number two, I just talked about Friday, so I'm not going to go into detail, but the Jefferson Street Bridge, we need an answer here in Joliet. It's not good enough to say, we'll hold the line until the bridge is fixed, it goes back into service, and wait for it to break again. The bridge is almost 100 years old and it needs to be fixed once and for all. It's a solution that myself and the city manager, Mr. Caparelli, are going to pursue in 2021. And then finally, something I'd like to see, one positive that may come out of COVID is how professional minor league baseball has been completely broken up. And I think the city of Joliet is in a real position where we could get an affiliated minor league team in Joliet. Again, this is something that has been kicked around in City Hall. We've met with different people, but you know, if you can't imagine for a second, if we were able to get an affiliated Chicago Cubs or Chicago White Sox team, the crowds that we could draw at the stadium, and not just local Joliet fans, but people coming from all over the region, the Chicagoland region, to see minor league baseball in Joliet. Because of the status of minor league baseball, I think there's an opportunity to do that. And it's something I definitely plan on pursuing in 2021. So then to wrap this up, again, I want to thank everybody for coming out, the people in person and all the people on Zoom who are watching this. Again, 2020 was a difficult year for all of us, certainly for people that lost loved ones during this past year. It certainly was a difficult year to be the mayor of the city of Joliet, or the mayor of any city in our country or throughout Illinois. But as I reflected on the year and I put the speech together, I can honestly say And some of the proudest moments that I've experienced as mayor did occur in this last difficult year. I talked about the water. To preside over a meeting where the mayor of Chicago and the mayor of Hammond are in the Joliet City Council chambers, and we're voting on this water issue, which is going to affect people for 100 years. It was a proud moment as mayor to be there over that meeting, to see this happen inside the city of Joliet. I talked about the rioting on May 31st. In the midst of all the chaos on Jefferson Street, when I saw the way our police officers, many of them young, who hadn't experienced anything like this before, again, the way they stood tall for the people of Joliet, the way they did not shirk their duty, but survived in the violence and acted effectively and professionally in preserving peace and protecting property. It was a very proud moment for me as mayor. The fact that not one Joliet City employee refused to come to work or refused to do their duty during the pandemic, not one, over 800 people. And that includes first responders. And again, if you rewind to the mindset where we were at a year ago in March or April, when no one knew the extent of this disease, and policemen and firemen were going, or firefighters and police officers were going on calls, not knowing if they were being contaminated, not knowing if they were going to take this home and infect their children or their parents or their wives or husbands. And yet not one instance of a Joliet police officer or firefighter or city worker not doing their job. It was an extremely proud moment for me as mayor, proud of our city. And then again, just to wrap it up, what I saw and what I continue to see at Joliet West, and quite frankly, if you haven't been there, you owe it to yourself to take a trip and see what our firefighters have done, and that they are saving lives every day in Joliet, volunteering their time to do so. I couldn't be prouder to be the mayor of this great city. So again, thank you, all of you, for coming out and hearing me today. Hopefully we'll have a full house next year, but thanks to all of you. Thanks to the Chamber of Commerce and Jen Howard and Jeff for putting this on. Thank you to the people of Joliet for allowing me the privilege of being the mayor of this great city. And I want to wish each and every one of you a very happy and healthy 2021. Thank you.
At this time, I'd just like to remind everyone of some upcoming events that the Joliet Chamber of Commerce is sponsoring. This Wednesday, March 24th at 2:30 p.m., we have the Women's Empowerment Forum virtual conference. In honor of National Women's History Month, Lewis University, in partnership with the Joliet Region Chamber of Commerce and Industry, invites you to join an interactive virtual open forum with women educators and leaders from our community. It's free to attend, and registration is required to attend. Also this Thursday, March 25th at 11:30 a.m., candidate forum for the Joliet City Council at-large election at the Jacob Henry Mansion Estate. All 12 candidates for the Joliet City Council at-large election on April 6th have been invited to speak at our March member luncheon. Each candidate will have an opportunity to present his or her platform, as well as answer questions prepared by the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee. The luncheon will follow social distancing etiquette. Cost to attend is $35 per chamber member and $45 for non-member. Registration is required. Also, we have our Boulevard banners on sale. Display your company logo on the streets of downtown Joliet this year. Plenty of excellent locations are still available. For more information about any of the upcoming events, please visit our website, www.jolietchamber.com. Please enjoy your lunch.